Good morning. So I'm going to continue the reading of the book of Traktum Rinpoche I think it's called Bright Virtue, actually. And it's a treatise on original innocence. So here we are. We are at a new chapter called The Mythopoetic Interlude from the Tantras. Now, mythopoetic, I looked the word up because I'd never heard of it, and it's apparently a movement from the end of the last century uh, of men's groups that were based on the work of Robert Bly and others, where they used myth and poetry as an entrance to work with the challenges of that men face in our current times. So that's the word mythopoetic. So here we go. Mythopoetic interlude from the Tantras. Once upon a time, that wasn't any kind of time at all. In a mysterious non-dimensionality of mysterious expanse, there lived an all-good king. This king was magnificent, blazing bright virtue. He wore the whole of the sky as a garment, a cloak of the stars, and a belt made from the planets strung like pearls. In his right hand he held the sun, and in his left he held the moon. Free from every constraint, his very perception gave rise to ceaseless appearances of beauty and splendor. He was indeed the all-good father of everything. At this time, there was also an auspicious queen. The mystery of her love was such that no idea, word, concept could reach its heights or plumb its depths, because no word could encompass the mystery of her. She had many names. She was called All Good Mother, for she was the womb space of all appearing. She was called Auspicious Queen, because from her depths only goodness is given birth. She is called Birthplace and Charnel Ground, for she is the birthplace of Buddhas and sentient beings, and where they resolve back into death. From her, Buddhas and beings are born, and yet there is never any increase in Buddhas and beings. In her, Buddhas and beings perish, and yet there is no loss. This all-good queen of the expanse and the all-good king of luminosity were full of love and joy. They cavorted in and as the perfect union of expanse and light, without even the notion self or other, with no notion of two beings or of even union. Their closeness was beyond the concepts of separation or togetherness. They were not two, they were not one. They were beyond enumeration in their mutuality and love. And, as love play tends to do, they gave birth to a child, a son. That which is without origin or birth is birthed from the birthless, without ever having been born. It is the truest mystery of incarnation and appearance. And the sun had a name, luminous blazing. The sun's name, luminous blazing. This child was made of playfulness, as all children are. He had no fear, for all appearances were none other than his home, his family, his parents, himself. He went out venturing across the ends of space, creating space as he went. He went exploring in all manner of countless infinite appearances. He journeyed through all possible configurations of the shattering of light in joy. In all of this exploration, in all of this wandering about, he was utterly fearless because he had no notion of subject or object, internal or external, here or there, self or other. This is what allowed him to be so playful in his adventures. And so, as must happen in all fairy tales, because they speak the truth of beingness, in the midst of all this adventuring, without cause or reason, he found himself one day in a dark and murky place. He found himself suddenly ensconced in an endarkened realm. He wasn't avoiding it, and he wasn't looking for it. He suddenly was just there. And in this endarkenment, he found himself suddenly to exist, found himself to be a separate being in an actual place, time, and dimension. Suddenly, confused to find himself to exist as some this or that, he found himself in a dilemma. He did not know what he was, where he was, how he was. He did not know if he would endure, perish, fail, or succeed, and all of these, in and of themselves, were the very description of the realm in which he found himself, called a self. He had ventured fearlessly into all experiences, and so now he was within new experiences, which included fear, birth, death, gain, loss, shame, fame, and the sensation of suffering and stuckness. He began to seek, and he began to seek in the only place he was, the realm of endarkenment. But as the realm itself was the shape of his endarkening, there was no solution to be found within the confines of its paradoxical axioms. For lifetimes and lifetimes, as all manner of being, he lived in this realm. He sought happiness in pleasures, power, relationships, here and there looking for some sign of the ease he still intuited from his former life. Now, his all good father and mother, having uncontrived, spontaneous, great natural compassion as the energy of their mysterious appearance non existence, felt sympathy for their child. They could feel his frantic panic, for it was not taking place in any other place other than the place that they always already were, and in truth, he was only lost in hallucinations. He was right there, always already with them, as them, of them. They called out to him and again, but all he would hear were faint strains of some unknowable, beautiful music. They would manifest to him in the guises of his realm as a passing sage, a bodhisattva animal, the embrightening of dawn sunlight, but he was unable to understand their symbolic presentation in the midst of his endarkened fears. He did, however, feel their communication as an ever growing longing within his heart, body, mind, and being, a longing for an unknown freedom, an unknown happiness that had no seeds of falling back into suffering. He felt he needed to return home. And so this motivated him, moved him, pushed him in his search. All the appearances that before had neither existence nor non existence now were concrete existence. All the spaces which before were simply luminous radiance, neither empty nor full, were now realms of beings. He began to explore in all these different realms of being. He began to look into things for some intuition, some sparkling through or whispering of the mystery he longed for. He sought happiness and gradually came to understand that true happiness could not come from things that change. The happiness he sought, he remembered vaguely, was a perfect freedom from suffering. And so he involved himself in spiritual pursuits of a more subtle nature, and his ability or his capacity to discern the subtle meaning of symbols and whisperings in his ear became more acute. Finally, he could begin to understand the meaning of symbols, whispers, and indications until one day he recognized an emanation of the All Good Mother, who was named Pregnant Rain Cloud, and he listened with great care to her instructions. She spoke of mysterious things, of a gem whose qualities were so astounding and amazing that it was called the Wishfulfilling Jewel. Whatever pure intentions or wishes were formulated by one who had this luminously blazing jewel would naturally and spontaneously come to pass. She said the jewel was owned by an old blind woman who was known only as Blind Grandmother, and that she lived in an octagonal palace made of magic that could only be approached by 5 horsemen, 5 warriors. Luminous Blazing must travel with the 5 warriors to where they would free 5 prisoners. These prisoners held the secret of the wish-fulfilling jewel's location. Many adventures come to pass as Luminous Blazing seeks out the 5 warriors. Finally, the little child finds himself in the palace of the blind grandmother. The palace is filled to overflowing with children, servants, and warriors. At the center of the palace is the blind grandmother, holding the wish-fulfilling jewel. Whenever he looks at it, it is a different color. It sparkles and shimmers in 5 colors. It is never the same color, and most mysteriously, when he looks at it directly, it has no color whatsoever. The blind grandmother is laughing, telling him that there is no chance he can ever have this jewel. There is no way anyone can get this jewel. Having become quite sensitive, Luminous Blazing also begins to hear the words of his own all-good mother in his ear. She is saying, "Do not believe her. Ask what the price is, and when she says no one will pay it, say, 'Then I will be that no one.'" The child does this, and the startled blind grandmother reluctantly says, "There are 8 payments to be made. 1. The price is the price of all one's intellectual conceit. One has to pay that price. One has to give up every concept of what is known and unknown. Number 2, one has to give up the arrogance of subjectivity and objectivity. 3, one has to give up all the grasping of a mountain of desire. 4, one has to give all of the striving and work that has been done throughout the ages. 5, you have to give up the conceit of self-concern. 6, the conceit of attainment has to be given up. 7. One must pay with the conceit of enlightenment. 8. One must pay with the conceit of being. Now the little child's living is running toward his loving, shouting, "What a bargain! I'll buy it." And in that moment he awakens from his dreaming of darkness and suffering. In that moment he does not find himself anywhere, but in the only place he ever had been. In that moment he does not find himself somehow different, greater, stronger, more famous or more powerful. In fact, he does not find his self at all, but again recognizes the play of knowing and luminosity as the only game in town. Now, mother, father, child, and all appearing are again what they have always been. Now, I think this lovely and beautiful fairy tale is enough for this morning. So I wish you a great day. Bye.